South Carolina this morning, the search continues in the upstate for a missing Boy Scout in Greenville County. Authorities say the boy was separated from his troop during a hike at Caesars Head State Park. Sheriff deputies and helicopters have joined in on the search.
A woman in Hooper has been waiting by the phone tonight for good news. Nearly 200 miles away, search crews have been looking for her 12-year-old son who disappeared on a Boy Scout outing. Leaders noticed Jared Ropalato was missing just after noon today.
The scout group was hiking the Spirit Lake trailhead near Daggett Lake on the eastern border of Utah. Just minutes ago, searchers suspended their efforts for the night.
About 30 volunteers, deputies, and search and rescue in Daggett County are trying to find 12-year-old Jared Ropalato. Back at the Ropalato home in Hooper, Jared's mom, Dawn, tries to handle her emotions and the constant phone calls. Just moments before we arrived, she was told her son may have been found, only to be told later that he was still missing.
Hello, friends. Steve Stockton here with you. Welcome to our latest video. Today, we bring you the story of 5 Boy Scouts who went missing in the wilderness. Join me. Let's walk and see. But before we begin, please take a moment to make sure you're subscribed, notification bell is on, and also you can click join. Become a member of the channel, get some exclusive members-only perks. Number 5, Luke Adam Sandberg. 13-year-old Luke Adam Sandberg was like any kid his age. He loved to play the violin and enjoyed being in nature. Luke, who attended C.R. Anderson Middle School in Helena, Montana, was also a part of the Boy Scouts and would look forward to the group's many trips into national parks. On June 24, 2005, Luke, along with 3 adults and 6 other Boy Scouts, headed into Yellowstone National Park for a camping trip. While this trip should have been a calm and peaceful affair, it quickly turned into any parent's worst nightmare. Unfortunately, the disappearance of Luke received little media coverage, and only a few official outlets have his story documented. On the afternoon of June 24th, the group made their way to the northern part of the park, close to Gardner, Montana. According to NBC, the 7 Boy Scouts, including Luke, were pushing logs into the river and just messing around. Unfortunately, as Luke pushed one of his logs, it clipped his legs and sent him into the fast-running waters below. The rest of the Boy Scout troop tried to rescue him, but the currents of the waters were just too strong. On June 25, 2004, Luke's tennis shoes were found 5 miles downstream from where he disappeared. His disappearance was reported immediately, and the National Park Service sprang into action. According to reports, volunteers and search and rescue personnel combed the river's banks looking for any sign of Luke. Park staff also created 24 manned observation points on bridges and high points of the river. Luke's father also traveled to Yellowstone to look for his son. Unfortunately, no sign of Luke has ever been found, and by the end of June 2005, the search had been scaled back. Luke's aunt told NBC, quote, "The family has come to the acceptance of not finding Luke alive," end quote. All his family wants to do is have his body to give him a proper burial. Luke Adam Sandberg is described as a white male with brown hair and hazel eyes, standing 5 foot 6 inches tall and weighing 110 pounds. He was last seen wearing tan shorts, a black and brown belt, white tennis shoes, which have been accounted for, and a watch. Anyone with any information is asked to please contact Chief Ranger Tim Reed of the Yellowstone Park Ranger Station at 307-344-7381 and reference case number 05-2385. Number 4. Brenan Hawkins. 11-year-old Brenan Hawkins achieved the impossible at an incredibly young age. Brenan was a member of the Cub Scouts, and during a trip, he mysteriously vanished. Remarkably, Brenan was able to survive for 4 days without food and water before finally being rescued. Many have hailed Brennan's survival as a miracle, and Brenan himself is both shocked and proud of how he composed himself during that time. On June 17, 2005, Brenan and a group of 1,400 Utah Cub Scouts visited the Uinta Mountains in Utah, around 60 miles east of Salt Lake City. The group of excited boys and their adult chaperones made their way through the rugged mountains to the Bear River Boy Scout Reservation and unpacked their bags for the exciting weekend ahead. After unpacking their bags and settling in, the Cub Scouts headed over to a large climbing wall. All was going well, and Brenan had been buddied up with Brian Christensen, a fellow Cub Scout, and the two climbed up and down the wall, getting all of their energy out. At around 5:30 p.m., the boys were called to a meal back at the base camp, which was just a quarter mile from the climbing wall. According to Brian, he managed to free himself of the climbing harness first, while Brenan struggled. Brian then took off running toward the camp, assuming that his friend was close behind him. Brian shouted over his shoulder, "Catch up with me," but he received no reply. When he arrived back at the camp alone, the adult chaperones were immediately concerned, and they ran back to the climbing wall to try to find Brenan. When they arrived, the site was empty. Brian explained to the adults how Brenan had begun to make the short quarter-mile run back to the camp, but somehow he never made it. The National Park Service and local law enforcement were immediately notified, and the search for Brenan began. Brennan's parents were informed of his disappearance, and they arrived at the Uinta Mountains shortly after to help look for their son. For 4 days, search and rescue teams and local law enforcement scoured the woods for Brenan, but there was just no sign of him. Just as his parents were coming to terms with what had happened to their sweet boy, a miracle happened. 43-year-old Forrest Nunley was out riding his ATV looking for Brenan when he came across a scared child near Lily Lake, around 5 miles from the Boy Scout camp. Forrest cautiously approached the boy and quickly realized he had found Brenan Hawkins. At first, Brenan was hesitant to get on Forrest's ATV and explained that when the horseback riders had come through the area looking for him, he'd run away because he was scared. Forrest grabbed his phone off his hip and called it in. All those involved in the search let out a massive cheer once they heard the news, and Brenan was brought back to the Boy Scout camp to be reunited with his family. According to reports, Brenan doesn't remember much about his 4-day ordeal in the wilderness. He told his parents that he drank water from nearby streams and huddled himself into a ball at night to keep warm. Incredibly, Brenan had traveled upstream rather than downstream. Martin Christensen, Brian Christensen's father, and the scout leader, told CBS News, quote, he, Brenan, immediately took a wrong turn from the 60-foot chipboard climbing wall, walking toward his tent camp instead of the mess trailer. When he realized his mistake, he doubled back through some burned woods, but took another wrong turn at the first trail he came across, the Smith's Fork Trail, end quote. After being recovered, Brenan was taken to the Primary Children's Hospital in Salt Lake City, Utah for complete medical examination. Days later, Brenan was released after being treated for dehydration and starvation, which had occurred during the 4 days he was missing. While Brenan was being transported to the hospital via ambulance, he asked the paramedics to get him some fruit, vegetables, and spinach. Number 3, Trenton Taylor. On July 15, 2008, 14-year-old Boy Scout Trenton Taylor headed out into the high Uintas near Salt Lake City, Utah. There are very few reports about Trenton's disappearance, and the details that we know come from a KSL article written in 2008. According to the article, Trenton was hiking in the Kings Peak area of the high Uintas when he got separated from his Boy Scout troop. Trenton had mistakenly followed deer tracks instead of the horse tracks of the scout leaders. The leaders and the other Boy Scouts had already made it to their base camp, and everyone was waiting for Trenton to arrive. Everyone assumed he was just behind them, but concern grew as the hours passed. By the evening, local police, search and rescue teams, and Trenton's parents had been called, advising them of his disappearance. Within hours, a search team had been put together, and they made every effort to locate Trenton. Incredibly, on July 16, 2008, after walking 30 to 40 miles, Trenton met up with another Boy Scout group in the area at around 12 p.m. Trenton explained to the group's leader that he had been separated from his group, and the new Boy Scout group took him in. The sheriff's office wasn't notified that Trenton had been found until the early morning hours of July 17, 2008. Trenton's parents were contacted and immediately drove to the Uintas to collect their son. Investigators discovered that Trenton had followed a trail, which is how he happened across the other Boy Scout group. It was also found that he had survived the night with just a sleeping bag, telling KSL, quote, I just fell asleep. I had a couple of Cheetos, and then I fell asleep, end quote. Trenton was taken to a nearby hospital for a full health assessment before being released back into the care of his parents. Number 2, Jared Ropalato. On August 12, 2011, 12-year-old Jared Ropalato and his Boy Scout group headed out into the great wilderness of Utah. The group had planned to hike through parts of Ashley National Forest and the surrounding trails, but shortly into their trip, one of them disappeared. According to reports, Jared Ropalato came from a family of outdoorsmen, and being the youngest of 5 brothers, he knew how to be tough. His older brothers were all Eagle Scouts, which Jared deeply admired and aspired to be. When his group set off into the Ashley National Forest, he was excited to use the skills that he had learned. After hiking in the forest, the group made the 4-mile hike from the Spirit Lake trailhead to Daggett Lake, where their base camp was located. Unfortunately, Jared got lost somewhere between the Spirit Lake trailhead and the base camp. It was until everyone arrived back at the camp and a head count was done that the leaders realized Jared was missing. The Daggett County Search and Rescue Team and the Sheriff's Office were called, and Jared's parents were alerted. Kevin Ropalato, Jared's brother, told KSL, quote, "As soon as we heard that he was missing, within a few minutes, everybody was calling us asking what they could do to help," end quote. Search dogs and a helicopter equipped with a heat-detecting camera were dispatched, and hundreds of volunteers set out on foot. The search was temporarily disbanded on Friday evening when darkness fell until the following day. While volunteers got some much-needed rest after scouring over 30 square miles, Jared's parents tossed and turned, wondering if their little boy could survive the night. At 7 a.m. on August 13, 2011, searchers once again donned their gear and headed out into the Utah wilderness to look for Jared. Incredibly, just an hour and 40 minutes later, a message came over the radio stating that the boy had been found. Jared had been found just 4 to 5 miles from where he had disappeared, and incredibly, he had survived the night in just his jeans and a shirt with no food or water. He told searchers that he buried himself in dirt to survive the harsh evening. He also said, quote, "When we went to scout camp last year, they taught us how to build a lean-to and how to stay warm," end quote. He replied no when asked whether the ordeal had put him off being a Boy Scout. And number 1, Joshua Dennis. On September 22, 1989, 10-year-old Joshua Dennis walked alongside his Boy Scout group as they entered the Ogra Mountains in Utah. Terry Dennis, Joshua's father, was the scoutmaster, and the group of boys excitedly set up their camp so they could get to exploring. Once everything was in place, Terry, Joshua, and 3 other Boy Scouts grabbed their lights and headed into the mouth of the hidden treasure mine. The boys ran down the tunnel, swinging their lights up and down the mine's walls. As the group got further into the mine and the path narrowed and began to twist, there were many forks, and Joshua didn't know which one to take. His father and fellow scouts' voices grew fainter as he moved through the mine, and suddenly he found himself even more lost when he tried to follow the light. Joshua's dad, Terry, quickly realized that his son had gotten separated and called for help. Within hours, local law enforcement and search and rescue teams had arrived to help search for Joshua. As darkness fell, searchers' concerns for Joshua grew. He was not wearing adequate clothing to get through the night, and he wasn't carrying any food or water. People piled into the mine, meandering down the forks, looking for the little boy, but it was to no avail. The search efforts intensified as the days went by, and hope began to dwindle. The cold September winds started to roll into Utah, and Joshua's parents, Terry and Janine, prayed every day that he would come home in one piece. Their prayers were answered on September 27, 1989, when Joshua emerged from the hidden treasure mine in rescuers' arms. According to reports, Joshua had been found just 500 yards from the mine entrance, where he'd been separated from the group. He was cold, hungry, and dirty, but in good spirits, and was taken to the Toole Valley Medical Center before being transferred to the Primary Children's Medical Center. Dr. Tony Woodward, who examined Joshua, told UPI, quote, "It's going to take a little time for his feet to heal. It looks like he has some frostbite," end quote. Doctors also noted that Joshua was dehydrated and in need of food. By the end of September, Joshua was released back into the care of his parents, who were glad to have him home again. Joshua told his parents that angels had been watching over him and that he'd been praying to God every day to find his way back home. Well, friends, there you have it. What do you think of these amazing stories of Boy Scouts who became lost in the wilderness? As always, I look forward to your comments, but please keep it friendly and respectful. Till we meet again, be good to yourselves and each other. Stay safe out there. As for me, I'll see you a little farther on down the road. I'm Steve Stockton, and I'll talk to you next time. And please, tell your animals I said hi.